She was called a bad woman and thrown out in the rain. 2 years later, she walked into his wedding, holding his two children's hands. The music stopped. Every guest turned, and when the groom finally saw her face, his entire world came undone. If you want to hear how this family really started, hit subscribe right now before we go back to the beginning, because this story only gets heavier from here. Mom, is that him? Is that the man you always go quiet about, our father? Come here, both of you. Sit down, let me tell you how this really started. Not the short version I've given you before, the one where I skip the parts that still hurt. The whole thing, all of it, because you're old enough now to hear it, and old enough to decide for yourselves what to do with what I tell you. The lounge on 44th Street only booked her on Thursdays, but Thursdays were enough to fill the room. Simone had been singing there for 2 years by then, ever since a manager named Renee heard her humming while she stacked chairs after a shift and told her she'd be a fool not to get up on that little stage instead of just cleaning around it. It wasn't much of a stage. A single spotlight that flickered if the building's old wiring got temperamental. A piano nobody had tuned properly since before Simone started. A room that smelled like candle wax and cheap wine, no matter how many times they aired it out. But on Thursdays it was hers, and she stood at the microphone in a navy dress that had seen 3 years of hemming and letouts and one very careful repair along the seam. And she sang like the room owed her something it hadn't paid yet. She never noticed the corner table until the 3rd week. It wasn't the kind of table that called attention to itself on purpose. No raised voices, no expensive bottles sent back with complaints, no phones held up to record her. Just 2 men standing behind it like furniture that could move fast if it needed to, and one man sitting in front of them who never once looked at his phone, who watched her the way you watch something you're afraid will disappear if you blink. Renee noticed him before Simone did. That one's been in 3 Thursdays running, Renee told her backstage, and he tips the waitstaff like he's trying to apologize for something. Probably just bored money, Simone said. Probably, Renee agreed. Still, doesn't hurt to know his name. You're the reason I keep coming back on Thursdays, he told her after her set, standing at the edge of the small dressing area like he wasn't sure he had permission to be there. I don't even know your name. June Seo. Beak June Seo? You sing like you're not trying to be liked. I'm not. I'm trying to be honest. Those aren't always the same thing. No, they're not. He didn't offer his hand. He didn't need to. Something about the careful way he stood. The 2 men who'd followed him as far as the doorway and stopped there like they'd been trained to, told her more about who he was than an introduction would have. He kept coming back, always with the same 2 shadows by the door, always gone before last call, always leaving a tip that made the other waitstaff whisper about him long after he'd left. You don't have to do that, she told him once, nodding toward the folded bills he'd left under his glass. Do what? Show up like this is a normal thing you do. It is now. Most people who come back aren't in this much of a hurry to leave. I'm not most people. No, I'm starting to see that. Weeks turned into a season, and the season turned into something neither of them had a name for yet. He started arriving earlier, staying later, sitting closer to the stage than the corner table that used to be his default. Renee clocked the shift before Simone let herself admit it. You like him, Renee said one night, not really a question. He listens, Simone said, like that explained everything, because to her, it did. Most men who come in here talking to a singer are only listening for an opening. He's not doing that. What's he doing then? Waiting, for what? I don't know yet, that's the part that scares me. Do you ever feel like your whole life was decided before you were old enough to have an opinion about it? She asked him one night, after the last table had cleared and the 2 shadows had stepped outside to give them a rare stretch of privacy. Every single day of it. How do you carry that? I remind myself a name isn't a cage unless I let it be one. Someday everything my family built lands on me, whether I want it to or not. What do you actually want? A room where nobody's watching the door. That with you, you don't even know me. I know enough. There was a night early on, when one of the two shadows nearly caught them somewhere they shouldn't have been, a quiet park bench 2 blocks from the lounge. Well past midnight, Junseo's tie loosened and his guard momentarily forgot. "Sir, we need to move," the taller of the two men said, appearing out of the dark like he'd been summoned by instinct alone, his eyes flicking to Simone with a look she couldn't quite read, not disapproval exactly, something closer to worry. "5 more minutes," Junseo said. "Sir." 5 minutes, Hyenwoo. The man called Hyenwoo didn't argue further, but he didn't leave either, and Simone understood, watching him retreat only as far as the street lamp, that whatever loyalty existed between those two men and Junseo ran deeper than a paycheck. "He worries about you," she said once the man was out of earshot. "He worries about what happens to all of us if anyone finds out about you before I've found the right way to tell my mother." "Is there a right way? I used to think so. Lately I'm not so sure." He told her, slowly in pieces, about the company his grandfather had started, and his mother had spent 30 years turning into something closer to an empire. Shipping, logistics, a controlling stake in 6 companies that touched more lives than most governments did. He told her about the meetings that started before sunrise and the board members who called his mother by her first name, and expected him to earn the same familiarity by proving himself twice as capable as anyone else in the room. He told her carefully, the way you tell someone something you've never said out loud before, that his mother had a plan for every year of his life mapped out already, and that no version of that plan had ever included a Thursday night on 44th Street. And she told him about growing up 2 boroughs over, about a father who left before she could remember his face, and a mother who worked 2 jobs and still made time to sit through every school recital. About the year, she almost gave up singing entirely because it felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. And about Renee talking her back onto that little stage one humid August night when she'd nearly quit for good. "We should be careful," she told him, months in, laying a hand flat against her stomach in the quiet after closing. "It's a little late for careful, Junseo. I'm pregnant." He went quiet for a long moment, long enough that she braced herself for the version of this conversation she'd heard about happening to other women, the version where the man found a reason to be somewhere else. Instead, he took her hand off her stomach and kissed it. "Then we figure this out together. Your mother will tell her when the time is right. Not yet. I'm not ready to hand her a reason to hate someone she hasn't even given a real chance." "Okay, not yet." Elijah was born on a Tuesday in a hospital 2 births away from anywhere the Beak name meant anything, in a room with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly and a view of a parking garage instead of a skyline, and Junseo was there for every hour of it, holding her hand so tightly the nurses had to remind him twice to loosen his grip. "He's perfect," Junseo said, staring down at his son like he'd never seen anything that made sense before. "He is," Simone agreed. "So now what?" "Now we keep doing what we've been doing, carefully, for a little while longer." For the better part of a year, Junseo visited them the way some men visit a secret, carefully, on a schedule, always checking the mirrors on his way out, always leaving before the sun came up, so the neighbors wouldn't start asking questions Simone didn't have safe answers for. He learned to change a diaper, standing in her narrow kitchen with the blinds drawn. He learned the specific cry that meant Elijah was hungry versus the one that meant he just wanted to be held. He learned, too, how to lie fluently to his own mother about where he'd been, and every lie cost him something Simone could see settling into the lines of his face, even if he never said so out loud. "I hate this," she told him once, watching him dress in the dark. "I hate leaving like this. Then stop leaving like this." "Tell her, Junseo. He's your son. I will, soon. I just need the right moment." The right moment never came on his terms. It came on hers. "Ma'am, there's someone at the gate asking for Mr. Beak," one of the staff said one gray afternoon, and by the time Junseo reached the door, his mother was already standing in it, umbrella still dripping from the walk up the drive, staring down at Simone, at the toddler on her hip, and at the shape of her stomach that no coat could hide anymore. "There's a child," his mother said very quietly, which was somehow worse than if she'd shouted. "Mother, and another one coming. June CEO, look at me. How long has this been going on behind my back? A little over 2 years. 2 years? A grandson I have never met, and a woman standing in my driveway carrying a second one, and you thought this was something you'd get around to telling me eventually." "I was trying to protect. You were trying to protect her," his mother said, cutting him off, turning her full attention on Simone for the first time, taking in the navy dress under the coat, the careful way Simone held Elijah closer, like a woman bracing for weather. "Let me guess. A singer with no name and no family behind her finds herself pregnant by the heir to everything I built, and then pregnant again, and somehow that isn't calculation, that's just love. I would call it something else entirely. I would call it a bad woman who saw an opportunity and took it twice." "That's not what happened," Simone said, holding Elijah a little tighter, refusing to let her voice shake even as everything in her wanted to. "I don't expect you to believe a word out of my mouth. I don't need to. I only need my son to see it clearly, which apparently he cannot. June CEO, tell her. Tell her whatever is easiest for you," his mother said before he could speak at all. "Because it is always going to be easiest, isn't it, to let someone else make the hard decision so you never have to own it." "June CEO, say something," Simone whispered, Elijah starting to cry against her shoulder, the sound of it cutting through the cold air like something sharpened. "Mother, we love each other." "Love is not the question, June CEO. The question is whether this family survives being handed to a woman I did not choose and children I did not sanction. Take a few days. Think clearly without her in the room clouding your judgment. June CEO, I need some time, Simone, just some time." She looked at him for a long moment, waiting for him to look back the way he used to, the way he had every Thursday for 2 years, and he didn't. He looked at the ground instead, and something in her understood, in that instant, exactly what his silence was going to cost all three of them. "Don't wait for him to grow a spine tonight," his mother told the driver, loud enough for Simone to hear on her way down the steps. "See that she and the child are gone from this property within the hour, and that she understands not to come back." He never called. Not that night, not the next week, not once in the months after. She told herself it stopped hurting somewhere around the 4th month of being alone, and she was lying to herself every single time she said it. She moved twice in that stretch, first out of the small apartment they'd started to think of as theirs, because she couldn't afford it on tips alone with a toddler and a second child coming. And then again when the next landlord decided a pregnant single mother with an infant wasn't the kind of tenant he wanted to renew. Renee let her sleep on the back office, caught more nights than either of them ever talked about afterward. There were nights Simone sang through sets with a fever she couldn't afford to stay home for, nights she counted change from the tip jar twice to make sure it really was enough for formula and rent both, nights she sat on the edge of a borrowed bed and asked herself, honestly, whether love had been worth what it cost. She never landed on an answer she liked. She landed, instead, on Elijah's small hand curled around her finger, and decided that was reason enough to keep going regardless. "You could call him, you know," Renee told her one night, wiping down the bar after close, watching Simone fold a stack of second-hand baby clothes into a bag with more care than the fabric probably deserved. "I'm not calling him. Pride's expensive, Simone. So is groveling to a woman who already decided what kind of woman I am before she ever heard me speak a full sentence. That's not pride. That's just true." Renee didn't push further that night, but she started leaving a little extra in Simone's pay envelope without ever mentioning it, and neither of them ever brought it up directly, because some kindnesses only survive if nobody names them out loud. "Ma'am, are you all right?" a voice asked one evening outside a hotel lounge where she'd taken a Thursday shift just to keep the lights on, catching her as her knees buckled under the weight of everything, the exhaustion, the 8 months of carrying a second child alone, the toddler asleep on the bench beside her because there'd been nowhere else to leave him. "I'm fine." "You are very clearly not fine, and you're 8 months pregnant with a toddler asleep on that bench, so let's not pretend otherwise. My name is Minsiok. Oh, Minsiok. I own this building, among a few others, which mostly means I know a woman in trouble when I see one. I don't need charity, I didn't offer any. I offered a chair and a glass of water. The charity part comes later if you'll let it. He learned her whole story over the next several weeks, in pieces, the way people learn things they actually want to understand rather than things they're simply owed. He didn't push. He asked one question at a time, on separate nights, and waited as long as it took for her to decide she trusted him with the answer. And the father just let it happen, he asked once, careful with his voice, watching her face rather than the road as he drove her home from a shift that had run too late. His mother made it very easy for him to let it happen. That's still a choice, Simone. It's his choice, not yours and not those children's. Stay here until the baby comes. My house has more rooms than I know what to do with, and no mother standing in the driveway deciding who's allowed to belong in it. Why would you do this for a stranger? Because I don't believe a person becomes bad for loving someone who wasn't brave enough to love her back in front of his own family. I believe that word gets used on women a great deal more than it ever gets used on the men standing right next to them. She said no the first 2 times he offered. The third time, standing in a doctor's office parking lot with Elijah asleep in his car seat and her own hands shaking too badly to get the key into the ignition, she said yes, and hated a little how much relief came with it. Zuri was born early, in the middle of a spring storm loud enough to rattle the hospital windows, and Minsiok was the one pacing the hallway when the doctor finally came out because there had been no one else to call. Both of them are healthy, and so is she. She's just very tired. Can I see them? Family only, I'm afraid. He's family, Simone said from the bed, before anyone could argue about it, and something in the way she said it settled a question neither of them had asked out loud yet. CTA, if you're loving how this one's shaping up, drop a like and tell us in the comments who you're rooting for by the end of this video, and stick around, because the reveal is coming. Uncle Minsiok, do you ever get tired of building things? Elijah asked one evening, years later, tugging at his sleeve while Zuri napped upstairs and the house had settled into that particular quiet that only comes after a long day with small children. No. Some things are worth building more than once. Do you think Mom is happy? What makes you ask that? She smiles a lot, but sometimes she looks like she's thinking about something that still hurts. Your mother has been through a great deal, Elijah. Every time I look at her, I see someone getting stronger, and the two of you are a large part of why. So she's happy, she's becoming happy, which is harder and better than just being happy. Those years had a shape to them Simone hadn't expected to find on the other side of everything. Minsiok taught Elijah to ride a bike in the wide, quiet driveway that had nothing in common with the one that had once turned her away. He sat through Zuri's entire, exhaustive explanation of every stuffed animal she owned, twice, without once checking his watch. He came to school recitals and stood at the back so the other parents wouldn't ask questions, and he learned, the way Junseo once had, the specific difference between Zuri's tired cry and her hungry one, except this time there was no drawn blind, no careful exit before sunrise, no secret to manage at all. He was simply there, every day, in a way that slowly stopped feeling remarkable to any of them and started feeling like the ordinary shape of a life. There was a rough week the fall Elijah started school, when another boy in his class announced loudly during show and tell that everyone in the room had a dad except Elijah, and Elijah came home quiet in a way that worried Simone more than tears would have. He didn't mean anything by it, probably, Simone said carefully, kneeling in front of him in the front hallway. He said it like a fact, Elijah said, like it was just true and everyone already knew it. Minsiok, who'd been standing by the door with the day's mail still in his hand, set the mail down and crouched next to Simone. Can I tell you something about facts, Elijah? Facts don't get to decide how a person feels about themselves. Only you get to decide that. Do you feel like something's missing? Sometimes. Then we don't pretend it isn't. But we also don't let one kid at a lunch table tell you who you are. Deal? Deal. He went back to school the next Monday with his chin a little higher, and Simone watched from the front step longer than she needed to, grateful in a way she still didn't fully have words for. You don't have to carry all of this alone, he told her once the kids were finally asleep, the two of them sitting on the back porch with the kind of silence between them that had grown comfortable over the years instead of strained. I know. I mean it, Simone. I see you every day and I choose you every day deliberately, and I'd like to keep doing that with a name behind it. Marry me? I love you for everything you've been to us, Minciok. But I won't marry you out of gratitude, even gratitude this deep. I'm not asking for gratitude, I'm asking for a real chance. I can't hand you a half-healed heart. You deserve someone who comes to you whole. He didn't argue with her. He simply nodded, poured her another cup of tea, and let the subject rest, the way he let most things rest that she wasn't ready to carry yet, not gone, just set down gently until she was ready to pick it back up. Across the city, Junseo's mother had already moved on to the next plan, the way she always did when one arrangement failed to produce the outcome she wanted. There is a woman I'd like you to meet, Choi Yuna. Her family's interests align with ours. Will you try? Fine, arrange it. He said it the way a man agrees to a business meeting he has no intention of enjoying, and for the first several dinners with Yuna, that was exactly what it felt like, pleasant, efficient, entirely hollow. Yuna noticed. She wasn't the kind of woman who missed things. You're somewhere else when you look at me, Yuna told him after their fourth dinner together, over wine neither of them had finished. I'm sorry, you don't have to apologize. I'd just like to know who I'm actually having dinner with. There was someone once. It didn't work out the way it should have. Because of your mother, because of me. I want to build something real with you, he told her months later, the words coming easier than he expected them to, maybe because Yuna had never once pretended their arrangement was anything other than what it was, and there was a strange comfort in that honesty. Will you marry me? Yes. Your results show some complications that may make conceiving difficult, the doctor told them gently near the wedding date, and Junseo sat very still in the small examination room, staring at a spot on the wall like it might rearrange itself into different news if he looked hard enough. You went somewhere far away in there, Junseo. I need to be honest with you. This happened before, with someone else. What did you do? I failed her completely. I let my mother decide who she was before I ever gave her the chance to show me. Yuna didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, quietly, do you still think about her? Every day. I'm not going to pretend that's an easy thing to hear the week before our wedding. No, it isn't. I don't want to lie instead, Junseo. If I'm walking into this with my eyes open, I need them all the way open. His mother, for her part, had no patience for hesitation of any kind. The invitations go out this week, she told him, sliding a folder across his desk without waiting to be asked whether the date worked for him. Mother, we haven't even you've had months, Junseo. Yuna is patient, but patience has a shelf life, and so, frankly, I want to see this family settled properly before I'm too old to enjoy it. And if I asked for more time, I'd remind you that the last time you asked for more time, it cost this family 2 years of secrets and a scandal I am still, to this day, cleaning up quietly behind the scenes. Don't mistake my patience for forgetting, Junseo. I haven't forgotten a single detail of that driveway. He didn't answer her. There wasn't an answer that would have changed anything, and some part of him, the part that still flinched every time he thought about Simone's face that night, suspected he didn't deserve to argue the point anyway. Mom, how come everyone else has a dad who shows up, and we don't? Zuri asked one evening, small and direct the way only a child can be, the question landing in the middle of an otherwise ordinary dinner like something dropped from a great height. Come sit, both of you. Your father and I loved each other once. Then his family made it very clear there wasn't room for us in it, and I had to leave to protect the two of you. Does he know we exist? he knows about Elijah. He never met you at all. Is he a bad person? He made choices that hurt us badly. Whether that makes him a bad man or a man who is too afraid to be a good one, I think that's something you two get to decide when you're older. Do you think he'd want to know us now? I don't know, but I think you deserve the chance to find out. Uncle Minciok, are you our dad? Elijah asked once, older now, old enough that the question carried real weight behind it instead of simple curiosity. No, I'm not your father, but you love us. Completely, both of you, and that isn't going to change no matter what else does. Then why aren't you our dad? Because your father is someone else, someone your mother knew before I came into her life, someone who doesn't know all of you yet, but someone you have every right to know. Elijah sat with that for a long time before he spoke again. Do you think he'd like me? I think, Minciok said carefully, that any man who got the chance to know you and didn't like you would be a fool, and I don't think you should waste one more day of your life wondering about the opinion of a fool. That conversation sat with Simone longer than she let either of the children see. She lay awake that night running the math she'd avoided running for years. How old Elijah was now. How much of his life had already passed by without a father in any of it. How close Zuri was getting to an age where the question would stop being something she asked out of curiosity and start being something she carried like a bruise. By morning, she had decided something she hadn't let herself decide in all the years since that driveway. I have to find him, she told Minciok over coffee, the words coming out steadier than she expected. I know. It's not about reopening anything between us. It's about them. Do you know where he is? I know the family name, and I know he's taken over the business. It won't be hard, and when you find him, I tell him the truth, all of it, and let him decide what kind of man he wants to be about it. I'll be here when you get back, all of you. Thank you, Minciok. I found him. The wedding is in 2 weeks. Give me until tomorrow morning, Minciok said. I'm arranging the plane. That's too much. It's practical, and you need to land with your head clear, not exhausted from hours on a train with 2 kids asking questions the whole way. Let me do this, just this once, when it matters most. The kids asked questions the entire drive to the airport anyway, the way children do regardless of how carefully the adults around them try to manage the moment. Is he going to be tall? Zuri wanted to know. What if he doesn't like my name? Elijah asked, quieter, the kind of quiet that told Simone he'd been sitting with that particular fear for longer than he'd let on. He's going to like your name? Simone told him, because I picked it, and I have excellent taste. Elijah almost smiled at that. Almost. Are you scared, Mom? Zuri asked, looking down at the clouds from the small window of Minciok's plane, her small hand pressed flat against the glass. A little. Me too. Is it going to be okay? I don't know for certain. But whatever happens today, the 3 of us will be all right. What if he doesn't want us? Then we go home. Together. And we're no worse off than we were yesterday, because what we already have is enough. Guests are arriving, someone said, the venue humming with the particular energy of a wedding about to begin. Flowers arranged in tall white arrangements down every aisle. A string quartet tuning quietly near the front. Junseo's mother moving through the crowd, greeting people with the practiced warmth of a woman who had spent 30 years making sure every room she entered understood exactly who was in charge of it. Let's begin. You look beautiful, Yuna. It's time, Junseo. What is that? Someone whispered near the back, heads turning as a woman in a simple gray dress walked up the side aisle with a boy holding her hand on one side and a girl on the other, neither child dressed for a wedding. Both of them looking around the grand room like they'd wandered into it by accident. Those children, look at his face in theirs. Mom, is that him? Is this the father we came all this way to find? Elijah's voice carried further than he meant it to, and the string quartet faltered, and somewhere near the front, Junseo turned around. You let me walk down that aisle into a lie, Yuna told him quietly afterward, in a side room away from the scattering guests, refusing every offer of a scene, every apology he tried to start and couldn't finish. I'm not devastated, Junseo. I'm disappointed, and there's a difference. I hope you're brave enough to finally do this properly. Goodbye. She left without raising her voice once, which somehow made it worse than if she had. CTA, if this one's got you feeling something already, tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens between Simone and Minciok once the dust finally settles. Stay back, Simone said, as he came toward the children, an old instinct rising up in her before she could stop it. Mom, we don't know him. You're right, and that's entirely my fault, Junseo said, kneeling so he was closer to their height, ignoring the murmuring crowd still gathered at the edges of the room, ignoring his mother's furious stare from near the altar. If you're really our father, where were you? Elijah asked, arms crossed, chin lifted, every bit his father's posture without ever having learned it from him. I let my mother decide for me. I have not had a single day since that driveway where that didn't sit somewhere in the back of my mind. Why didn't you come sooner? I was afraid, and I was weak, and because of both of those things I missed years I can never get back. I'm sorry, truly, for every part of it. Sorry doesn't rebuild what you broke, Simone said, her voice steady even as her hands weren't. I know, I didn't come here for an apology. I came because they asked me for the truth and I couldn't give it to them without giving them access to you. If you come into their lives, you come in completely, Junseo. You show up every time, no exceptions. They owe you nothing. Do you understand that? I do. And whatever I owe them, I intend to pay every part of it. How do we know you won't leave again? Elijah asked, arms crossed the exact way his father's were, the resemblance so precise that several of the remaining guests audibly caught their breath. You don't, not yet. I could promise you, but that's just more words, and you've had enough empty ones already. What I can tell you is I know exactly what I did and exactly what it cost, and I've had a long time to decide I don't want to be that man again. That's a fair answer. Is it enough? It's enough for today. You called her a bad woman, Junseo told his mother later, alone in the house he grew up in, the two of them standing in the same entryway where it had all fallen apart years earlier. I built your life, Junseo. You built a version of it that had no room for the truth, and you handed a good woman a word she never earned just to make my choice easier for you. I don't know how to fix that. Neither do I, but I'm going to try, with them, and with Simone, if she ever allows it, without waiting for your approval this time. His mother didn't answer that. For the first time in longer than either of them could remember, she didn't have a plan ready. He came the following Saturday, exactly when he said he would, standing on Minciok's front step with his hands empty, because Simone had told him flatly that showing up with gifts the first time would look like he was trying to buy something that wasn't for sale. Zuri answered the door before anyone could stop her, looking up at him with the frank, unguarded curiosity only a child that age still has. You're the dad, she said. It wasn't a question. I am. I don't know you yet. That's true. I'd like to fix that if you'll let me. She considered him for a long moment, the way she considered everything, and then held the door open wider. You can come in, but you have to see my room first. It's very important. He spent the next hour being shown every stuffed animal she owned, for the second time in that household's history, and this time he checked his watch exactly 0 times. Elijah was more careful with him, hanging back near the kitchen doorway while Zuri dragged their father from one corner of the house to the next. It was Junseo who closed the distance eventually, sitting down on the porch steps beside him rather than waiting for Elijah to come to him. You don't have to talk to me if you're not ready. I'm not mad, Elijah said, which surprised them both, the words arriving before he'd fully decided to say them. I thought I would be. Are you? I don't know yet. Mostly I just have a lot of questions. Ask them, all of them. I'll answer everyone, even the ones that make me look bad, especially those, probably. Elijah studied him for a moment, and then asked the first of what would turn out to be a very long list of questions, and Junseo answered every single one, exactly as he'd promised, without once looking away. I was wrong about you, his mother told Simone on her doorstep, unannounced, weeks later, No driver waiting this time, no umbrella held by someone else, just an older woman standing alone in front of a door that had every right to stay closed to her. About what I called you, about what I did that night in the driveway. I told myself I was protecting my family. I've sat with what it actually cost for a long time now, and I'm sorry. I appreciate you saying that. I'm not going to tell you, I forgive you today. I don't know yet if I do, but for the sake of those children, I hope you meant it, because they deserve grandparents who see them clearly. I'd like to meet them when you think the time is right, if that time ever comes. I'll think about it. It took another month before Simone decided the time had come, and even then, she set the terms herself rather than leaving room for anyone else to. Neutral ground, a public park, no drivers, no umbrella held by staff, and no last names spoken louder than necessary. Junseo's mother arrived alone, exactly as asked, and stood a careful distance from the bench where Elijah and Zuri sat, waiting for someone to tell her it was all right to come closer. You can sit, if you want, Zuri said eventually, patting the space beside her with the same directness she'd greeted her father with weeks earlier. I don't bite. Junseo's mother almost smiled at that, an expression that looked unfamiliar on her face, like a muscle she hadn't used enough. I've been told I can be difficult, she said, sitting carefully. I've heard that too, Elijah said, and for a moment nobody was sure whether it was an accusation or simply a fact stated plainly, the way children state things. It's true, his grandmother said finally. I was difficult and worse than difficult to your mother, and I have spent a long time understanding what that cost all of you. I don't expect you to forgive me today. I'd just like the chance to be someone worth forgiving, eventually. It wasn't a full reconciliation. Nobody in that park mistook it for one. But it was a beginning, careful and small, exactly the kind Simone had learned, over the years, mattered more than any grand gesture ever could. How are you holding up? Simone asked Minsiok quietly, weeks after everything had settled into its new shape, the two of them sitting on the same back porch where he'd once asked her to marry him and she'd once said no. Managing. It costs something, I won't pretend otherwise, but I know what matters here, and it's those two and their well-being. I meant what I said to you, both times. Real love doesn't trap anyone, Minsiok. No, it doesn't. He said it simply, without bitterness, the way a man says something he has finally, fully made peace with. Life, in the months that followed, settled into a shape none of them could have predicted from where they'd started. Junseo kept his word, showing up every Saturday without fail, then twice a week, then often enough that Zuri stopped announcing his arrivals like they were events and started simply expecting him, which was its own kind of victory nobody talked about out loud. He and Minsiok met properly for the first time over coffee, neither of them particularly wanted. Two men who'd loved the same woman in entirely different ways, sizing each other up across a small table. I owe you a debt I can't repay, Junseo said finally, breaking the silence first. You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone decent would have done. Not everyone would have. Minsiok considered that for a moment, turning his cup slowly on its saucer. Maybe not, but I didn't do it to be owed. I did it because she needed someone in her corner, and then because I wanted to be. What I want now is for those two children to have a father who shows up, because that's what actually matters here, not what you owe me. Junseo nodded slowly, and something between them settled, not quite friendship, but something closer to it than either had expected walking in. Simone watched all of it unfold from a careful distance at first, half waiting for the ground to shift again the way it had that night in the driveway, and when it didn't, when weeks became months and Junseo kept arriving exactly when he said he would, she let herself believe slowly that some kinds of change were real. She still hadn't answered Minsiok's question from the back porch. She still woke some nights turning over everything that had happened, the singer on 44th Street who never imagined any of this, the mother who'd built a life out of the wreckage of one bad night, the woman still deciding, carefully, what she owed herself now that everyone else's needs had finally stopped crowding out the question. Junseok was lost for a long time in the weight of a name he never chose. But love, the real kind, has a habit of finding its way home no matter how far it has to walk to get there, even when it isn't the love you expected to be waiting there. CTA, if you want to know whether Simone ever really opens the door for Junseok, or whether Minseok finally gets the answer he's been waiting for, subscribe and turn on notifications for part 2. And share this one with someone who needs the reminder that it's never too late to become the person you should have been all along.